Welcome back for another episode of Sunday Soul Day, your go-to podcast for personal and professional growth, weekly fuel for your mind, body, and soul. We're back after taking a few weeks off to rest and recharge. We have quite a show today with our guest Dave Gibbons, the founder and lead pastor of Newsong Church in Santa Ana, California, and the visionary behind X, a global network helping people find purpose and meaning. As an author, corporate advisor, and pastor, Dave has guided leaders across diverse sectors with a unique blend of faith and modern leadership insight. His recent memoir, The Shape of My Eyes, dives deeply into his experiences navigating Korean and American cultures, exploring identity, race, faith, and trauma. Dave brings a wealth of wisdom, bridging faith with the complexities of today's leadership landscape. Welcome to Sunday Soul Day, Dave.
Man, I'm so happy to be with you, Demisha. Thank you for inviting me.
Absolutely. Oh my gosh, I could not wait for this interview. I know we did the live recently on Instagram, talking all about your book, which we'll dive into. But I first thought we'd start with letting the audience get to know you a little bit better. I wanted to because you've had such an amazing journey, and I just wanted you to kind of walk us through your journey prior to becoming a coach and a corporate advisor so people can understand, just your journey a little bit more.
Yeah, for sure. Well, I was first interested in spirituality. And so I went into the faith community and helped to start a church for those who don't like church. And then the young people. So we targeted like the next gen multi-ethnic community. And then from that, I evolved into discovering that I really enjoyed not necessarily always being in front of people, but like being behind the scenes. I'm more an introvert, and I like people who kind of like are eccentric, and a lot of founders tend to be that way, and or they have stuff going on like all of us, but they can't talk to anybody about it because it's hard to trust others.
Yeah.
And so I found them really being able to trust me, and they started inviting me closer to their lives, and that then emerged into senior advisement work. And so that's what I do today. I advise different leaders around the world.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and you've gone all around the world, had the opportunities to work with companies, as well as athletes and just a lot of different professionals. And also as a corporate advisor, which is actually where our paths cross because you were advising a company, a VC firm in Burlingame called Goodwater.
Mm-hmm.
And I was hired as their kind of head of talent and HR. And I remember the first time we met, I will never forget it because you walked in with such beautiful energy. And I was like, who is that? Like, you just came in and I could feel you shift the energy in the room. So talk to me a little bit about that, like what you were doing there. And also, what was it like working with me?
Oh, okay. We're going to let it all out right now, huh? Okay. Well, I loved working there. And I think being part of that community at Goodwater was exciting for me because I found that the senior advisor role, I didn't really understand it before until I got into that environment.
Mm-hmm.
And so, to be able to go into that environment, and usually you think about VCs being sterile, just like this, they were focused on a lot of analytics work. And so it could be very much like, a geek atmosphere, and not a negative geek word, but in a positive. So I found myself like excited about being there to try to bring positive energy to that environment. And that's where you came in. I mean, we needed help in the HR. We needed someone to be able to come in to bring positivity, inspiration, but also the operational end of things in terms of policies, benefits, customized development of the people. And when I met you, I saw this woman with force, that is, the force wasn't like a demagogue type of force. It was more like a winsome, positive, joyful person. Even though I know you were going through different aspects of your life, like us all, you didn't let that hold you down. You would go into an environment and still spread your love and positivity and energy to people. So I really enjoyed working with you and how you cared for people. I mean, you really cared for the individual. And I saw that and how you interacted with some of the people that I had been working with for years there.
Yeah. Oh my gosh. Thank you for saying that and also noticing. And it was a difficult time. I was going through a separation with the father of my children, and
Hmm.
starting a new job, and just felt very beaten down by the whole thing. And so
Yeah.
so it was definitely a challenging time, but I tend to get my energy from giving to others, and that's how I help myself heal, is really by pouring into others, which then allows me to feel even better about myself, because then I feel like I'm doing what God asked me to do. So that's really where a lot of that comes from, And so I just really appreciate you noticing that. But there's something that you said to me, and I'll never forget it. Um, and I'm so appreciative of it, because you said to me, you don't have to show up as anything other than yourself. You're already enough. And I didn't feel like enough at the time, And so when you said that, it really helped me tremendously. So I'm so grateful for you during that time.
No, I'm so proud of you because just to get to where you were and are right now is quite an accomplishment. Because you're first of all you're a woman in a very male setting.
Yeah. I won't go.
You're a black woman, and so that's a double whammy typically in that type of corporate environment. And then you're a daughter of a celebrity,
Yep.
and so you live in like this shade of a celebrity. So all the positives and challenges of that, and you overcame that. So to me, for you just to survive was a win, and then for you to actually accelerate your career demonstrates your leadership and then your character.
Thank you. Thank you so much for saying that. Thank you.
Yeah. Oh yeah,
And
it's
it's
true.
and it's so spot on, and I think anyone who's grown up in that environment can really relate to what you just said. So
Hmm. Hmm.
um one thing that I just am so curious about, because you have built Newsong Church, but with others. Like, tell us a little bit about Newsong, just so people who aren't as familiar. Where's it located?
Hmm. Newsong is based in Orange County, California, and specifically in the city of Santa Ana. And we moved from Irvine, which is upper middle class, to Santa Ana because Santa Ana is considered in Southern California one of the worst cities. And because of at that time, a lot of the gangs, the houselessness, the drugs, uh, the immigrant and refugee population had a negative perspective, and so you know I felt that we need to go there, and that's what really New Song's about. We're about looking for the misfits, the outsiders.
Hmm.
And from my faith background, usually you think of people just like you when you think of churches, like Martin Luther King Jr. talked about. It's like the most segregated hours, 11 o'clock on Sunday morning, and so I felt, man, when I read the scriptures, which Christians follow and a lot of other religions respect at least. It seems like Jesus was always about loving those who others would just cast out, and that was his priority. And so I said, no, I want to make that my mission, and that tied into my relationship with my mom because she was an outsider. She was a woman, a Korean woman, an immigrant, and her English wasn't that good, so she had that also as a difficulty. So when she had the divorce, and then my dad had an affair, it just destroyed her, and the church didn't know how to work with her. They
Hmm.
cared for her, I'm sure, but they didn't really have a place for her. So when I thought about New Song, I thought, man, I want to create a place for someone like my mom, and she could go there and she would find a safe haven and friends and people who would love her.
I love
And
that.
so, yeah, that was the dream, that Newsong could be created like that all over the world. And that's what we started doing. We started multi-sites all over the world. The one word focus is reconciliation, relationship between our higher power and also relationship with each other, especially people who are of diverse backgrounds. And then from that, we started developing a model where instead of the typical church where you just come in, hear the preacher, and do small groups, we said no, we should be more like an X-Men Academy where the vision is to support people in their dreams and launch them into their destiny versus try to feel like they have to anchor in here forever, and serve like whoever's the hierarchical leaders in that place. I just
Mhm.
felt it should be reversed, that it always should be about serving and supporting the people, feeling free, like a really good school would do.
Oh my gosh, I love that. And you nailed it so much because I feel like organizations should take a similar approach too. Like, leaders should be creating other leaders. And so I love that you take that approach and really focusing on the misfits and the outsiders. What were some of the initial challenges that you face, just establishing yourself within that community, because it is very different than Irvine. I used to live in Southern Cal for about 14 years.
Yeah, I think just the cultural adjustment, it's
Hmm.
bigger than you think. It's one thing when you talk about color of skin and but it's in racial culture that's big too, of course, or ethnic culture. But the biggest to me was the economic piece, the poverty. I had not worked with those who are houseless, and I had not worked much with those who came from abject poverty, and where you have like two or three families living in an apartment and small apartment, and so I just didn't know what that's about, and so I think that was the biggest challenge, is trying to understand that and taking the time to figure that out. The second thing probably is learning how to collaborate, because when you look at systemic transformation of a city, it's monumental. There's no way any one institution can can resolve the systemic problems of education, health, justice. There's just it's impossible. So you have to have partnerships to accomplish these things. So that was the
Wow.
second challenge, is moving from a silo where it's about branding and creating this vortex of energy around your brand to actually seeing that you need each other and how can you help serve one another. So those were the two probably biggest challenges, Demisha.
Wow. Wow. I can only imagine. And especially just dealing with a completely different, demographic and, economic background. Like and really earning the trust too, of that particular community. It's,
Yeah.
yeah, I can only imagine.
The the
Well,
other the other thing too is the transition.
mm,
Like when you take a group of people that's used to one environment and then you
yes.
move it to another, it's a really really difficult transition. There's an analogy or metaphor that we talk about often. Says you can't put new wine into old wineskin. Because the
Yeah.
idea is that old wineskin, once it starts new wine expands in that wineskin that's new, it just goes with it. But if it's an old wineskin, it's expanded to its extent. So you put new wine in it, then it just explodes it. And so
Mm-hmm.
I think I knew it was going to be difficult, but I didn't know, I think, the depth of the difficulty of transitioning a community that's used to a certain context and culture to
Mm-hmm.
another one.
Yeah. Yeah. Wow. Well, one thing I've always admired about you, and so many things, but one thing I've admired is just the community that you have built. It's so diverse. Filled with just remarkable individuals from, like I said, athletes to uh, under, privileged areas to, celebrities. Like, I mean, you just have had this extraordinary life and filled it with such, like I said, just remarkable people. For those of us who want to create kind of similar communities and expand ourselves, how, like, how would you coach someone into doing that? Like, what advice would you give to others looking to kind of build a thriving community around them?
It's a couple of things I would say is, once your mindset, start
Mm,
with your mindset,
so good.
and that everything you probably have is within your reach.
Mhm.
Everything's in your hand. Usually you look at what you don't have, first look at what you already have. And so, for example, you have so many gifts, but once you compare yourself to other people, you're always going to find someone better than you and something else. But you have a unique combination of gifts. And it's true, other people have the same gifts, but it's like a song where, we all have the same notes to use, but then the way we put it together,
Yeah.
you create your own song. So that's where we're different, and you have your own unique song. And so realize that, man, you got everything you need. So don't get so discouraged that you're paralyzed by the fact that you don't have this or that. You will
Mhm.
get nowhere. The question is, well, what do you have? And start with that. And
Mhm.
secondly, I would say is you want to have a posture of listening and learning and experimenting. Listening, learning, and experimenting. Because at this stage, you just want to ask a lot of questions. Before I launched any endeavor, some people say, "Oh, did you just randomly start and become successful?" I said, "No. If you talk to the people who know me, it's like
Mhm.
it took sometimes years. I did tons of study. I tested a lot of things. I read a ton. I create a deck, and then I would present it to all my friends, and then ask for feedback. Ruthless feedback. So be totally honest with me. Radical candor, and so listen, learn, and experiment. You're going to fail often and fail fast. So your mindset has to be that way. And then the third thing is, I'd say usually you'll see that there's someone near you that can help guide you. So again, there's a lot of people you may want to know, but you may be surprised that there are already people within your network that are within your reach that may hold the keys for your dream to come true. You're one person away from a dream happening. And so expect that, hey, somewhere at the right time, I'm going to find that person. Then I'm going to learn everything I can from that person. And I found that to be true. Every time I needed to move forward in what I felt was my vision or the vision I was given, I would find the person. If I didn't have that person, I'd continue on the same path of learning, listening, experimenting, and then learning from those experiments. But I would always look for the right people to continue to come alongside of where. And then I think the last thing maybe is the attitude of serving others. Ultimately, it's not just about serving yourself, but as you give yourself away, like you do often, as you have a heart to really be generous and give yourself away, it's the abundance principle where as you give away, you gain back so much
Mhm.
more. And so just trust that at some point, your strategic giving is gonna be they're gonna be seeds of a harvest for down the road.
Mhm. Oh my gosh, that advice is such a gem. Like, it's so good, especially around finding, others as well. And I call those like destiny helpers. I feel like, God puts destiny helpers along our path, as long as we're doing the work and, opening ourselves up. He puts people along those paths that can really help guide us, those guiding lights. So I love that. And the listening and learning is so key, and having that abundance mindset. So love, 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 love that. Well, I want to talk about your book a little bit. I am so excited about your book, and I know the feedback has been just tremendous from what I've seen online, and listened to a lot of folks talking about it. What was your, first let's just start with, like, you were diagnosed with PTSD. which was a surprising discovery. When were you diagnosed? And then how did that diagnosis kind of shape the way that you viewed your past as well as some of the memories that you buried? Because I know that was part of the reasons that you kind of went forth with this book.
Yeah, I think it was about 8 years ago.
Wow.
Yeah, and I think the reason why it came up was I was noticing some of the challenges my own family was having, my kids, with some mental health challenges, and what I felt wasn't critical was that this is not just their challenges. This is congenital. That it's something I need to explore as a parent.
Mhm.
And so then that because of that diagnosis, it helped me to realize there's probably a lot of stuff I just ignored and did not deal with. And so I said, hey, I'm getting old enough now that's affecting my children. And I don't want this to be a generational thing that keeps going on. I need to explore exactly what are the traumas, what are the hidden addictions or mindsets that I have no idea about. And to be honest about it, and then try to learn from it so that there could be healing in me, but also healing in my family and my community that I'm with. And so it's helped. So it helps shape, I think, the way I focus my energy, because
Mhm.
I think a lot of us, because we don't deal with the hidden traumas, addictions, and stories that anchor us, we tend to be, you know, well, for me at least, not everybody, a workaholic, where you just start
Mhm.
hustling, and I can hustle like crazy,
Mhm.
and I can keep the energy up, but often they say that can be toxic energy.
Mhm.
There's a book called "Amusing Ourselves to Death," or work. I'm sorry, working ourselves to death,
Working yourself to
and
death. Yeah.
yeah, and it's a Japanese study of these Japanese workers who they worked really hard, but they were overusing their adrenal glands,
Mm.
and that was toxic. So
Mm.
they died early. So they were feeling
Oof.
energy, because that's what people say.
Yeah.
Well, I still got the energy, but it's not coming from the right place. So yeah, so I think it's shaped where I allocate my resources and how I see my life. That's not meant to just be working and vision. We're future oriented. I need to be present and deal with what's going on, embrace my pain and my past.
Yeah, and I really believe that's the difference between living in fear and love.
Mm.
And we don't always associate it with fear,
Hmm.
but if you break it down into simple, just simplifying it, as I love to do, Marianne Williamson, in her book Return to Love, talks about that, like living between fear and love. And like when you're living in the past or in the future, that's more fear based. But when you're living presently, that's love. That's when you're, very present within yourself, present within the people that you care about, So I love that you first shared that, because, I think a lot of times people don't always share their pains, and your generation as well, like my parents are similar, they don't always share the things that they went through and the traumas that they, dealt with and are still dealing with, so just hats off to you for even being vulnerable to share In the Shape of My Eyes, which is on Amazon. You guys, please go get it. It's everywhere.
Yeah,
Definitely pick it up.
thank you.
You also mentioned something that I thought was incredible that you shared, is you mentioned a DNA test revealing the truth,
Yeah,
that completely changed your understanding of your family history. Tell us a little bit about that.
yeah. So I've always said that I'm half white and half Korean because my dad told me I was, and
Mhm.
and my birth certificate has him as my birth father. When he passed, though, I decided I do a DNA test, and because I want to make sure and also prove to my wife that she was wrong, because she didn't believe it. When people say, "Well, you should look in the mirror; it's obvious," but
Yeah,
if you study genetics, you can have a black parent, a white parent, and look a child look totally black or totally white.
absolutely.
And so, I just believed, okay, I just believe it. But when it came back, it said I was like almost 100% Korean. So, I had to put my tail between my legs and just and then we laughed. And then, but I didn't have like this like sorrow. It just sparked a
Yeah.
deeper curiosity.
Yeah.
Like, and because I said, oh, maybe that's why I feel sometimes I don't feel anchored or I don't feel at home. There's these misconnections or things the dots weren't clear. And so, yeah, so that diagnosis or that analysis, the feedback I got from the DNA test, it caused me then to go deeper into trying to find out more about my parents' past, both my
Wow.
biological and my mother, and then also even my dad who raised me. To understand more about him, it went that direction too. So I'm still looking for my biological father. I just recently, just a few months ago, and it wasn't even a book because as the book was being written,
Mhm.
I found my mom's. In Korea, they have these things called registries, family registry,
Okay.
where they list all the people in a particular family, and it's a
Mhm.
historical record. Well, we found my mom's registry, which is like a needle in a haystack, because they usually give like social security numbers to everybody, but my mom was before that era, so it's hard to find her.
Dave.
And so we had somebody do some crazy things and was able to get us the information. And how we knew it was my mom, because her name could be spelled differently in Korean. Like it could be multiple ways, the way you say it. And so the way we
Mhm.
knew it was my mom and her family was here you had these Chinese characters, because Korean wasn't even being used at this time. It was Chinese characters, Korean language, but it was Chinese characters. And then you saw different names, and then you saw my dad's name, Gary W. Gibbons, my white dad, um,
Mhm.
written right in the middle of all these Chinese characters. So we said, oh, there it is, and that's proof. And so yeah, so that allowed me to get a visa to Korea now. So I think it's the visa right next to being declared a citizen.
Oh, wow.
And so it's
Oh
pretty
my
cool.
gosh. What? Okay, that's like incredible discoveries, at this stage of your life when you've gone, do you mind me asking your age? Do you mind me
Oh,
sharing?
I'm 62.
Oh my gosh. Like over 60 years going,
Yeah.
thinking one way and
Yeah.
then discovering something completely different,
Yes.
and I love that you didn't allow it to completely blow up your world, but just went down the very curious route, and I think that is something I wish for everyone. And a large part of my platform and how I'm using my voice is to just really excite people about learning themselves, because I think if we're always looking externally for guidance for everything, and really all the answers are inside of us. So if you take the time to get really curious about yourself, and really who you are, and constantly peeling that back, and look, we're always going to be evolving and growing, but staying in that curious, light, it's so beautiful. So many beautiful learnings. So I love that you touched on that.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, it's hard, for I know some people, because they're
Mhm.
afraid of the pain and
Yep.
and discovering things maybe they don't want to discover. But
Mhm.
to me, I always felt like these secrets that we have and these hidden things, they're the ones that kind of drain you. It's like dealing with an
Mhm.
unresolved conflict. We say, oh, it doesn't bother me, but you're subconsciously, I think your body still reacts to it
Absolutely.
and it weighs you down. So yeah, it's such a healthy endeavor, even though,
Mhm.
it can look difficult.
Yes, absolutely. Well, your book also touches on discrimination, oppression faced by the Asian, community. How did this history resonate with your own personal struggles, as well as how did it influence and your reflections on race and belonging?
Yeah, well, in my personal journey of like being Asian American,
Mhm.
I didn't really dive into that or start to understand it until I was like in fourth grade. And so I didn't even think about the color of my skin or the shape of my eyes until I went to Arizona. And that's when people start saying racial things about my eyes.
Mm-hmm.
And so that thrust me into the whole arena of racism and prejudice. And I think, I don't know if I dealt with it that much, except dealt with it personally, but I never really talked about it. You just say, I'm going to be quiet and work harder than everybody else. And so I think initially, again, it was just a hidden thing I just coped with. But then it became more to light when I was in university in the South. And it was a Christian university, and they're the biggest in America at the time for Christian schools. And they called me into the office and asked me, or they told me that I couldn't date another race beside Asian. And
What?
yeah, they tried to say it was biblical. That's what.
Mm, mm, mm,
So I realized, oh my gosh, this is like the exact opposite of what I know God, or who I know God is, and what He establishes in the Scriptures. And so what happened is, I think it caused me seeing this type of deep racism. How gave me first empathy for the Black community, because I think the Black community has been struggling with this in America for over 400 years,
yes.
and
Still to this day, look at the election.
it's horrible.
I mean, it's horrible.
It's ridiculous what Kamala has to go through, and
Mm,
again, she's white or she's Black, and she's uh, Asian, East Asian,
mm-hmm,
but also she's a woman. So again, she has to go through double what a typical man has to go through.
mm-hmm.
But I didn't have empathy about that. But the deeper I dove into it, I said, this wasn't originally like an Asian issue at this school, even. It was a Black issue, because I found out that Brown versus Board of Education, which was the desegregation thing that was passed on, this school did not abide by it in the 50s. And so that's why the government was going after them, Supreme Court, because they had this no interracial dating policy when they were supposed to be desegregated. So I found out later that while the Brown versus Board of Education thing happened in the 50s, there was an Asian guy that was there, that was a famous Asian guy that married white. And then he was still considered like one of them, a hero. But then 70 after this Brown versus Board of Education thing, they kind of doubled down, and they didn't change any of the rules until 71 through 75. They allowed a Black couple on campus, not a single, because I think they were afraid of intermixing. And
Mm-hmm.
so I said, you know what, this is not. I go, we're collateral damage, Asian Americans, and it's racism against us, but it's actually because of the Black community. And so I said, wow. I go, just like we see with women having to work harder, it seems, than men, the Black community has to work harder because of
Mm-hmm.
the color of their skin. And so, yeah, so I think it forced me to have a lot more empathy to my Black brothers and sisters.
Mm-hmm.
And then, secondly, that this is not just a like what something superficial. That this type of racism is systemic
Mm-hmm.
and within institutions. And so we have to go deeper and find that type of cancer and deal with it, which isn't easy. But it's not going to sometimes be quick. It's a long haul game. And that's why like something like reparations are important, because
Absolutely.
so many of the white class and others of us have been able to accelerate because of the benefits the parents got with the GI Bill and other components. Uh, so yeah, so I think it helped me to readjust my mind to be more
Mm-hmm.
empathetic to other communities, but also secondly to focus my prioritization upon systemic change, not just superficial change or with little nice statements or inspirational
Exactly.
pithy things.
No, exactly. I think the change is it's going to take so long, because it's been going on for so long.
Mhm.
But it needs to start somewhere. And so reparations is one thing, but also I think, people need to look inward at themselves and who they're surrounding themselves with. We're always talking about, diversity, equity, inclusion, but it's like people aren't even leading that in their own lives.
Exactly.
So it needs to start there, because that's how you
Exactly.
gain an understanding, opening yourself up. Like I'm so privileged. I have a diverse range of friends, all different walks of life, have dated different, backgrounds, and I'm so grateful for it because it's given me a really deep empathy, for individuals. So I love that your book touches on that, and just the trauma around it. I mean, we have to heal. We have to heal somewhere, and we're just not going in that direction. And I'm seeing it now during the election. Just with all
Yeah.
the comments. So,
Yeah, the dog calls like
oh,
it's ridiculous. And even with like something as simple in this, like the sports field, with
mhm,
Tyreek Hill and the way he was arrested. Granted, he should have rolled down his window. He should have,
absolutely.
he should have been more respectful to the
Mhm.
officer. But that doesn't give an excuse for the officer
No,
to well, people say, well, officers, this is only one of them. I say, well, yeah, it's actually more than one of them. This is the one we saw, and then we're seeing cases of this all over the country. So this is a systemic issue. It's a training issue. It's a selection of these type of officers. So of course, there's good people within the police ranks, but
absolutely.
it never excuses, especially if you have power and you have a gun in your hand. There's a power dynamic that's different. You're not. It's not the same. It's not. It's like they're not equals in that situation. You have
No,
one that's much more powerful that could kill you, and
exactly.
so you don't abuse that power.
Exactly. I could not agree more. And I also feel like because they're trained, they should be held to a completely different standard, a
Exactly.
higher standard,
Exactly.
and the fact that they're not just blows my mind.
Yeah.
It shouldn't be excused, And so I have seen police officers, even just witness, police officers, do just terrible things. But also I've seen other police officers jump in and, kind of intervene, during those moments. And so when I was looking at that, that football player and how no one intervened, it's like no one was like, hey, let's calm down. There was none of that. And so that's what I struggle with. It's like there needs to be better training because we know racism is learned. No one is born racist. Like, I mean, the saddest thing is when I look at my son, who, we're in Arizona, and he is 8 years old today, but at the time last year, he was 7. And probably about 5 of his classmates called him a black monkey. And the teacher the class that he was in didn't really do anything about it. Didn't even tell me about it, just kind of was like, oh, you guys don't do that. That's not good. And, she really cut off the learning for everybody, by not doing that. And so, of course, I intervened, and the leadership of his school is fantastic. They did an amazing job, after that. I won't go into all the details, but I'm really grateful that my son had enough, sense in him to say like, no, that's not right. That's racist.
Hmm.
And he stood up for himself. But I'm thinking, my gosh, even at 7 years old, we
Right.
have to deal with this, and it really broke my heart because I'm like, I know it's here. I've experienced it myself, but you don't think like your kids, at that age would experience it, and it starts early.
I know.
So, on top of being a single mom and all the things that I'm building, and doing, and all the things that I'm trying to impact and serve, it's like I'm also dealing with that as a mother, So it's very different. So I love that your book touches on that for us.
How do you personally, like, when that type of stuff happens, whether it's to your son or to you? How do you release the negative energy?
Hmm. It's a really good question. And the way that I coach my son, because and it's the same kind of methods that I apply to myself, is I talk to him about people not having an understanding. And I said, a lot of times people say things and do things because they don't have a deeper understanding of the impact of that.
Mm-hmm.
And, at his age, those kids didn't really know the impact of those words, right? But their
Right.
parents did.
Right.
And so I told my son, I'm like, sometimes people don't see us as equal.
Mm-hmm.
And a lot of it is fear based.
Mm.
And when we talk about living in love, I talk to my kids about that fear and love. I said, a lot of times people are living very fearful. I
Mm-hmm.
said, and whatever those fears are, I said, it has nothing to do with you, but everything to do with what's going on inside of them.
Mm.
And so what we don't want to do is go around labeling people, because that's what we don't want them to do to us,
Mm-hmm.
I
Mm-hmm.
said, but at the end of the day, like, we need to understand that there's going to be challenges in this, and this is our opportunity to help others and to stand up. And so I told him I was very proud of him, as I am myself, because I remember the first time I was called the N-word.
Mm.
I was in Portola Valley, my sister and we were walking. We didn't even know what it meant. So we went home, and of course, my parents were, pissed, but we had no idea, because, we hadn't really experienced it. And that was just the start of,
Mm-hmm.
then it's like you experience overt and, kind of covert racism, and it's like inside of organizations, even there was a lot of kind of racism, but it's not as, overt, so
Oh yeah.
it's very kind of hidden in comments, hidden in your feedback. Like, I had an organization that I, parted ways with, that completely changed the way that I was going to be evaluated for my 1 year anniversary. Even though I had completely designed the process with all of the leaders, and everyone agreed that this is how we're going to evaluate the entire organization, we had about 40 different people go through that process. But when it came to mine, I was going to be held to a different standard.
Wow.
I'm the only Black woman there.
Wow.
So, it's things like that that I think that people don't see.
Mm-hmm.
But on top of having to work harder, being held to a different standard, being reprimanded for things that no one else is reprimanded for, like, just all of these things is what we have to deal with. And I think for me, I understand it has nothing to do with me. And so that's what helps me. That's what keeps my energy up, because all of these things, even when people project onto you,
Mm-hmm.
it has nothing to do with you and everything
Mm-hmm.
to do with them,
Right.
in how they're living fear based.
Mm-hmm.
So, and whatever those fears are, it could be a multitude of things.
I know that's really good. That's powerful, Demisha. Thank you for
Thank
sharing
you.
that.
No, thank you for asking. Thank you so much for asking. Oh my gosh, we can talk about this stuff all day. I'm like, all day. I love talking to you about this. But one thing I'm so curious about, because you went through this beautiful process, and, I call it the pomegranate process, where you kind of break yourself open to get to the sweet spot of who you are, right?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
um, you know, the shape of my eyes touches on evolving relationships and also religion. Your relationship with religion. How has I guess your faith evolved over the years?
Yeah. I think it's evolved from what you talked about, from fear to love.
Mhm.
There's talk about love, but it's another thing when you're placed in pressure situations or you spend a long enough time, you realize, even though they may use the word love, it's not the culture of love.
Yes.
And
Oh,
so,
Dave.
yeah, so I think there's been a shift from fear to love focus. And I think this God is much more open and kind than we could ever imagine.
Mhm.
So I think that's evolved. And then I think what's evolved too is the priority for diversity, because I think a lot of the problem problems we have is because we don't engage people not like us, and so we're not able to not only understand them but understand ourselves, because the more you engage with people different than you, the more they become like this mirror where you're able to see yourself in a different light. Um,
Mm.
and because we have so many illusions that we create about ourselves. And so I think being with other people, if you're in close community, there's good feedback, positively and challenge wise, for you to look at your own values, your beliefs, your systems. So the more traveled you are, the more you engage different cultures and socioeconomic levels, I think the more mature you become and more humble you are. Uh, so I think my faith journey has moved more from that, from fear to love, and from being dogmatic to being much more open.
Yes. Yeah. Oh gosh, that's so good, Dave. And I'm like, I feel like I've seen that too. Like growing up, I felt like people identified with specific religions. And I'm not saying they don't do that today, because they still do,
Mm-hmm.
but I'm seeing this huge shift over maybe the last, like, I want to say like 8 to 10 years, where people are a lot more spiritual
Mm-hmm.
than religious.
Mm-hmm.
Like, are you seeing that as well? And what do you think that shift is? Like, would you agree or disagree?
Yeah, I agree. I think there's, when you're going through chaos, sometimes religion
Mm,
becomes a safe place because it's black and white, it's clear and clean, it seems. So people gravitate towards that clarity. But, the more you dive into it, it doesn't hold enough of the vastness of knowledge and experience. It's just like you can't put it just through that one box lens. So I think people saw that and realized, all truth is God's truth.
mm,
And while we respect a certain religion or denomination, there's probably other things that are even more positive in some other groups or philosophies and religions that we need to also affirm while still holding on to your core convictions. So you don't have to compromise yourself, but
mm,
but I think this understanding of institutions are important, but spirituality is probably what we really want to go after as well. It doesn't mean that we don't need organized institutions. They have a place in society,
absolutely.
but their posture is important. That they should be, again, seen as a servant to the community, and
Mm,
they
mm,
should be a
mm,
model of what embrace and love looks like.
mm,
It doesn't excuse any large institution if they're big, just because they're big, or because they have a positional authority. They should always be held accountable
mm, mm.
to how they treat people with dignity, respect, and love, no matter what their core beliefs may be.
That is so spot on, and it's so good, because it kind of talks to what we were sharing earlier around DEI and opening yourselves up. It's like it's the same with religion. Like one thing I've done is study different types,
Mm-hmm.
because there's so many great things in all of them. And I'm like, oh wow, how can I apply that? Because my relationship with God is a personal one. And I believe church is in us. So whether you go, it's you're taking church everywhere.
Mm-hmm.
So and I know your book kind of talks about this concept of home. And how I would say, what does home mean to you now? And I guess, how has your understanding evolved over the years?
Usually, home, when people define it, they think of a place
Hmm.
or a structure. When I think about home, I think of a context of meaningful relationships. And so I can be almost anywhere within any structure. And if I have meaningful relationships around me, I feel like I'm home.
That is so good, Dave. Oh my gosh, so good. Well, you are serving. so many different communities, and your family, you're writing books, traveling all over the world. Like, how do you fuel your mind, your body, and your soul? How do you keep yourself up and your energy up?
Yeah, it's a great question. I think first you have to do an assessment,
Mm.
and that's what helped me years ago. I had a wise consultant I paid for a couple of days, and he
Mhm.
had me do an energy test assessment where you write down four quadrants:
Mhm.
what energizes you, who energizes you, what de-energizes you, who
Jesus
de-energizes you.
Christ.
So this is a core inventory, which I said, man, you have to define reality and really look at what is the source of energy and then
Mhm.
what is de-energizing. And then you have to ask yourself, well, what's the priority now here in terms of how you want to focus your life? Usually you find yourself, if you're totally de-energized and bored or not moving forward, is because you're mostly with de-energizing people doing de-energizing
Yes.
things.
Yes.
So, if you're a parent, you have to do some de-energizing things, and you're working sometimes with de-energizing people. So it's,
Mhm.
you have, those are responsibilities, but if you have a choice, you can probably change your schedule around so that
Mhm.
you're focused upon these fuel sources.
Mhm.
And so that's what I did. Is I think I would tell people, and the way I did it was I refocused my reality to to start absorbing the things that give me life.
I
And I
love
literally started placing things on my schedule and eradicating things that were not really life giving and not really necessary. So, for example, one is I was on multiple boards, which were really great boards with good, reputable boards. I would make my resume look awesome if I stayed on them, but I knew that someone else could do this. And
Mhm.
then secondly, boards really bored me, where it's really was difficult to sit for multiple days in a board
Mhm.
meeting when I knew someone else could be doing what I do in that
Mhm.
meeting. And so I basically got off those boards, and I
Mhm.
and I got off all boards, and so I could focus my energy on things that give me more life. But yet at the same time, I re-navigated and reoriented my relationship with the leaders and said, hey, if you ever need me though, feel free to call me. But I don't think you
Absolutely.
need me in the board meetings.
Mhm. Yeah, that's, oh my gosh, I love that. I do that with my clients, and it has been such a powerful transformation for them, because I think a lot of times we are so focused on time,
Mm-hmm.
how we spend our time, which is great, and we should be. You hear about time boxing and doing all these different things, but energy is so important in looking at your energy and what energizes you, what de-energizes you, but then also like your circle, and um, and how much of it you're giving, so
Yes.
I love that you touched on that. Well, my goodness, this has just been such a treat. You know how much I love you, and I am so grateful that God allowed our paths to cross, and I'm so proud of you. And Dave has not just one book, but he has two others that are leadership focused, but this one is just so personal, In the Shape of My Eyes, and it's such a beautiful book. I'm in the middle of it, so I'm not gonna not gonna share too much, but
Okay.
definitely pick it up.
Demisha, it's always a joy to see you. And I'm so happy for how far you've come as a leader and as one who, as a mom, as a woman, as an entrepreneur. I hope you'll continue to be kind to yourself, and that you'll experience great joy in all the things that you're involved in today.
Thank you so much for saying that, Dave, and everyone. Thank you so much for tuning in. Have a beautiful Sunday.